France. For many of us, we picture city landmarks, bustling streets, and sophisticated cafe culture. But if you head deeper into the country, there's another side that's wild and little known. I really love France. It's a naturalist's dream, and the reason for that is all the different habitats that you find here. In this series, I'm going to explore them in search of the many hidden wonders that there are to be found in wild France. I'll be travelling to some of the most spectacular regions of France. From the snow-capped mountains to the rolling plains, from deep forest to rugged coastline. I'll be exploring the unique plants and wildlife that thrive in this unspoilt wilderness and the secrets that are hidden deep within it. That's amazing. On my adventure through wild France. I'm right on the southern coast of France, where one of the greatest rivers, the Rhone, empties into the Mediterranean. As it meets the ocean, it spreads out into this large, fertile delta, absolutely teeming with wildlife. This is the largest river delta in Western Europe, the Camargue wetlands. As the Rhone River flows into the sea, it creates a tapestry of landscapes, salty and freshwater lagoons, sandy beaches, and huge marshlands, and my journey will take me through them all. I'm starting inland, where the wide, fertile delta is home to what looks like the Wild West. The Camargue horses and cattle are native to this area, and for thousands of years they have roamed freely on these plains. Today, this is also home to a unique group of French cowboys, or gardians, who work with the animals. Frédéric Bon is a second-generation gardien and still uses their traditional skills. So how old is the tradition of the gardien?
It have stayed quite strong tradition in the region since more than 100 years old. It's the only place where you can find this type of tradition, so we are quite proud of it.
Tell me about the Camargue horses, because they're quite special, aren't they?
Yeah, usually the Camargue horses is here to work with the cattle. Mm-hmm. So the Camargue horses is a very rustic horse. He lives all year outside. He's used to live with the bulls and the cows, and it's a very nice horse to ride and to work with him to do our job.
Lovely animals to look at. The Camargue horse is thought to belong to an ancient breed. They have evolved to adapt to this exposed landscape. Compared with other types of horse, they have very flat hooves, which allow them to move quickly on the muddy ground. With the damp ground beneath and the high temperatures in the summer, humidity can reach over 80%, perfect conditions for biting insects. But the horses' coats turn white as they age, which is thought to be an evolutionary adaptation, as insects like horseflies are more attracted to darker colours. So Frédéric, what's the plan now?
Now we are going to take our horse and go to pick up the bull who will run this afternoon in the arena of Beaucaire.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
Okay, sure.
Great.
Let's go.
Later today, there is a traditional bull race in the local town, but first the guardians need to separate the chosen bull from the rest of the herd. Herding these large and semi-wild bulls with their long horns can be dangerous, so I follow behind in a truck. We're moving the herd up from the wet, uneven terrain towards the drier, flat plains where it is easier to move underfoot. It's quite a sight, isn't it? These bulls look very rangy. They've got real energy about them. And the ones with the bells will lead the others. These Camargue bulls are lean from a natural diet of reeds, marsh grass and salt plants, but they can reach weights of over 400 kilograms. Fantastic. You can see they're using great care in how they're moving the bulls. They don't want to stress them out in any way. In fact, that's very important to them. It's fascinating. Here you've got the gardien, the French cowboy, and it's interesting to see how similar these traditions are all over the world. And in fact, the horses here are trained to the neck rein, so they can be moved with just one hand in exactly the same way that cowboys do in the United States. And here we go again. The gardiens gather the cattle calmly into smaller herds. They use specific whistles to encourage them to group together. Then they will split the group so that the prize bull is on his own. A real privilege to be able to watch this. Fantastic. Well, that was fascinating. They've brought in a group of bulls and they've separated one off, a magnificent animal. And that bull has gone in amongst the bulls that have got bells on, which are slightly tamer. And of course it feels comfortable because it's in company. And that's really clever. It's a very skillful process. Magnificent looking animals. The one they want is the one right at the front. Amazing. Look at the size of that bull. Fantastic. Frederick invites me to accompany him and his prize bull to the traditional bull race. Bull running in the Camargue dates back to the 16th century. People from all over the region gather together to take part in the traditional course camarguaise. Locals dress in traditional clothing and owners put their best bulls forward for the race. Well, this is quite a big event, isn't it? This is a special event involving bulls, but the bulls don't get harmed. In fact, the only person really at risk are the humans that take part. And this is an old tradition. Back in the old days, the farmers would come here, they would put their wagons in a ring, and this event would take place inside that circle. Now there's this special amphitheatre. The young men taking part are called rasateurs. Their aim is to collect cloth rings from the horns of the bulls, known as cocardes. Each game is 15 minutes long, so that the bulls don't get tired. But for the rasateurs, they keep going, even in the hot sun. Like in horse racing, the more successful the bulls, the more valuable they are for breeding. It's really interesting to feel this Camargue atmosphere. It's a very special event. It unites people in a uniquely local way. As the festivities come to an end, the gardiens take the bulls back to the grassy plains. And I move inland towards the reed beds that surround the freshwater lagoons. This is home to some very different animals. As soon as I arrive, I catch a glimpse of an unusual creature, one of the largest semi-aquatic rodents in the world. It's fantastic. The last time I saw one of those was 1983, because in Britain we got rid of all of these animals. It's a coipu, which is a strange creature. If you see them on land, they've got the front end of a beaver with the tail of a cat. But, amazing to see again. Coipu are well adapted to a life on the water. Valves in their nose and mouth close automatically when they dive, and they could remain underwater for 5 minutes without breathing. When it lifts its head, you can see its very strong, powerful teeth. Koipu live in burrows alongside the water's edge and feed on the stems of the reeds around them. They're mostly nocturnal, so I'm lucky to see one here. I want to explore further in these reed beds, so I'm taking to the water in this flat-bottomed boat, which is well designed for these shallow waterways. Well, it's a little different to canoe, but the principle is the same. Very nice way to travel. As you come further inland, what you're left with are these incredible reed beds, which are, of course, a different and wonderful habitat for wildlife, a whole different raft of animals here. And the reed itself has been incredibly useful to people as well. It was an important thatching material, but it has other uses too. I'm going to use the reeds to create a boat hide to watch the wildlife. The harvesting of reeds is a very ancient tradition here, and in fact, it's one that benefits the reed beds. It's another case of utilising the natural resources in the right way helps to shape and enhance the environment. This looks like a good place. I'm going to push the punt into the reed beds here. The Camargue is one of the world's most important bird reserves, home to over 300 different species. Many birds live here all year round, attracted to the region's rich set of habitats, changing water levels and abundance of insects. Other birds migrate here for just a few months in search of a milder winter and food. And for some visitors, the Camargue is a mini break, a stopover on their long journey between Europe and Africa. What I'm making is a makeshift blind. Any waterfowlers who've used a punt will be familiar with this technique. And voila, a perfect, simple hide. Just bend a couple of those down. And now all I have to do is sit and wait. See what comes into the reed bed, and the boat is a really comfy seat. It's an old hunter's trick, and it works really well. No expense, everything's natural. Couldn't be better. This is a bird watcher's paradise. That's a reed warbler. Reed warblers favour the reed beds as a breeding site because they offer shelter from predators. These birds are well suited to the habitat. They're able to cling onto the vertical reeds and plant stalks whilst looking for insects. There's an egret coming past. Awesome. There's a glossy ibis. They're so beautiful. I love the way they fly. It feels like Heathrow Airport. There are aircraft coming all the time. Just these ones have got feathers. My last spot is a black-crowned night heron. It's waiting for dusk to fall, the perfect time for it to feed. Well, there are worse ways to spend a day, aren't there? Before the day ends, I make my way back to dry land. Tomorrow I'm continuing my journey towards the sea, where I'm hoping to find one of the most spectacular sights this landscape has to offer. I'm in the vast Camargue wetlands in the south of France. It's a landscape bordered by the fresh waters of the Rhone River and the salty Mediterranean Sea, and it offers a huge amount of different habitats to explore. I'm continuing my journey across this landscape towards the shore. It's a lovely sound, the gentle lapping waves of the Mediterranean. Whenever you get two habitats meeting, like the Mediterranean and the land in this case, you find incredible habitat that's always exciting for a naturalist. Here the dunes are literally being held together by the roots of grasses like marram and plants like the sea holly you see growing here. So they actually thrive by shaping the landscape around them. But there are other plants that take advantage of these circumstances and are in their own right specialists. Take a look at this. This is a type of sea lavender. In fact, there are 6 species that grow here in this incredibly rare habitat, and they're very highly protected under French law. This is an interesting plant, and it deals with the salty conditions in a unique way. If you look really carefully, you'll see salt crystals there. This plant can actually excrete the salt. The way that these plants have adapted to thrive in the salt-laden landscape is fascinating. You expect to find salt by the sea, but here it spreads inland. Mostly the shoreline of the Mediterranean is rocky, but not here, because the Rhone deposits silt into this area, and in fact, this land here is growing. And what we have is this incredible area of salt marshes and dunes. And the dunes act as a natural barrier. When there are storms, seawater can surge over the top, but then is trapped in inland lagoons. Now, when you combine that with the strong effect of the local sunshine, you get an evaporation that makes the water in those lagoons very saline. This saline water contains a particularly high concentration of dissolved salt. People early on recognised that there was a potential here to make salt, and that's something that continues to this day. Salt production is now an important industry. The Camargue salt farms produce over 250,000 tonnes of salt every year. These saline lagoons are so salty, they're caustic, so you could be forgiven for thinking that nothing can live here. The water is 10 times saltier than the sea. That's enough to burn human skin. But incredibly, some animals have adapted to this hostile habitat, and for them, it is a salty paradise. Nature is rather remarkable. Listen to that sound. That's a huge breeding colony of greater flamingos. In fact, it's the only place in France that you can find them. It's a breathtaking sight. The greater flamingo, not native to France, has set up home here in these salty lagoons. I'm joined by ornithologist Frédéric Bouvet, who is an expert on the Camargue's flamingos. I couldn't wait, I had to get the scope set up because it's such an impressive sight. Frédéric has been studying these magnificent birds for nearly 40 years. How many flamingos do you think you've got here?
There are about 10,000 pairs.
Unlike mammals, most birds are monogamous. Flamingos breed in pairs, sharing the responsibility of looking after their young. I noticed that sometimes when you have a pair together, obviously they do this thing where they tuck their head in, and then they seem to be skating underwater. They don't lift their feet out of the water. They're almost in synchrony. Flamingos are what they eat. The pink colours of a flamingo's feathers come from eating pigments found in algae and shrimps. The birds shuffle their webbed feet to stir up the lagoon water and suck it up through their curved bills to filter out what they don't want.
it's incredibly fun and funny to watch a group of displaying flamingos. It's the only time you'll see them with their heads, with their necks held up really straight. Usually their head is between their feet feeding, or it's on their back with their neck around their breast. But when you see a group of flamingos with their neck held very straight, they're displaying. And so they'll synchronize, there'll be a group of between 10 and 100, and they will bounce their head from one side to the other, all together. And a bit like humans in a discotheque, really. And then when things really start to heat up a little bit, a few will open their wings and say, look how pink I am. The pinker they are, the better it is.
In the pink. It's great to watch. I mean, there's all sorts going on. Nature is a miracle. Although some flamingos will stay here all year round, most will migrate south once the cooler months arrive. Flamingos flying in the evening light, that is sheer poetry. The Camargue is a fascinating place. It doesn't grab you between the eyes like some of the environments in France. It's subtle, you have to get to know it. But its beauty is undeniable. Join me next time as I unravel the mysteries of France's great forests.
We're back in Coronation Street tonight, where Steve's still reeling from news of Leanne's pregnancy, but Michelle's got some news of her own next. And at 9 tonight, the 1980s party revolution is not without its troubles in Sheffield in Brief Encounters. And tomorrow at 8, for some very deserving people, Alan and the team have got a new series of Love Your Garden.